How do we turn this on?
Colleen will get you. Give us a,
Is that it? Is that?
Colleen will get you. And Jack.
Is that good? Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, folks, I was going to actually do the talk first and then show my artwork, but I'll bring the artwork over with my lovely assistant. This is my lovely bride who accompanied me tonight. So, and I'm not going to take too long on this, but I'll give you a few, I'll talk for a few minutes. And then I'll get right on to the thing. And then if you want to come up and take a look at this, we'll put it over on the table here. The reason I was asked is one time years ago, some of you may remember that I was asked to come here and just talk about my artwork. Okay? So I brought just a couple of pieces because I didn't want to take up too much of your time on this. Yes? Oh, thank you. So, I'm going to put this up here, and just put this here, and I'll talk about these. Now this is my particular brand of artwork, and it's called pointillism. And basically all of these are drawn one dot at a time. Okay? Yes, one dot at a time. Okay? There's a pencil drawing underneath, and then I erase it down very light, and then for the next 4 months I sit in the cafe at Barnes & Noble and I make little dots. Okay? So this one is called Wonderful World. And the subject matter was the daughter of a friend of mine who, when she was born, I was convinced, and still am, that she was the loveliest child I had ever seen in my life. Just absolutely beautiful. So she started to get a little bit older, and I thought to myself, I have got to do a picture of that girl before she gets too old. So I never actually have met her yet. Her mother took photos of her and sent them to me. And I made this little idyllic picture for her, which is a little sweeter and a little nicer than sometimes the stuff I do. But this one is kind of a personal one. So now this other one, which is called Ensemble. Again, same thing, drawn one dot at a time. And this is a friend of mine who modeled for me with her violin. And then I pretty much made it. She was just standing there with the violin in a t-shirt, and everything else I made up. The birds, the background, the flowers, everything. So it's just, again, just kind of a nice musical themed piece. And the ensemble with her and the hummingbirds as her accompanists. Okay. Very nice. Thank you. And the last one is part of a series I'm doing, which is kind of a meditation on the times we're living in. And it's called High Places, and it's the third in a series. This one just won an award down in West Virginia. Again, all one dot at a time. And it's basically just an idea of the battle for our minds. Reason on one hand, which is symbolized by the owl, and kind of chaos symbolized by the crow. And them fighting for the soul of the person there. So anyway, that's a little bit more topical than I normally get, but it's been something that's on my mind lately. And that's, again, one dot at a time. So I'm just going to put these right here, and if after I'm done talking about TR, if you want to come up and ask me about them and take a closer look, I'd be delighted. And also I want to tell you that when I'm talking about the TR, when I'm done, I'll take your questions and answer them to the best of my ability. Okay? I love questions. I always have more to say about the topics that I'm talking about than I can actually fit into the talk. So your questions will stimulate other things that I might might remind me of things I might have wanted to say had I had more time.
Your pictures are beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, it's my principal love, I have to say. I spend a lot of time doing it. And I wonder someday when they end up in a garage sale somewhere, what will ever become of them, you know? Okay, well, thank you for having me back to talk about history, because history, along with art and literature, are my first loves. And today I'm going to be talking about a particularly fascinating character from our American history, and that is Theodore Roosevelt. Okay? I'll be discussing the man who absolutely has to be the most colorful and engaging character, okay, of our history. The 26th President of the United States. Now, as usual, this can only be an introduction to Roosevelt's life as which was a life of constant movement and activity. He was a man temperamentally incapable of staying still for any length of time. All right? To anyone with even a casual knowledge of the history of the U.S. presidency, TR, as we will be referring to him, was its most dynamic member. Dynamic is only one word that you might use to describe him. Others might be energetic, gregarious, ambitious, enthusiastic, impetuous, outrageous, but I kind of like dynamic. I think that sums him up the best. I think dynamic best describes him because he was a living explosion, okay? Force and energy bursting out and forth in all directions, causing motion in everything around him, okay? That was Roosevelt. In any situation, he filled the room and was the center of attention and activity. Alice, his famously outspoken daughter, once said of him, "My father always wanted to be the corpse at every funeral, the bride at every wedding, and the baby at every christening." Okay? He wasn't always good at sharing that attention, though, okay? When asked why her father took an instant disliking to the young Winston Churchill when they met, she replied, "There wasn't enough air in the room for both of them to breathe." Okay. He was the most popular president in history during his tenure of office. While he was in office, there never was anyone who was more popular at the time. The people loved his youth and robust energy, his large family, and his far-sighted policies for the betterment of the country. Unlike many others in his place, the office of the presidency did not overwhelm him. He overwhelmed the office, okay? He expanded its powers and the scope of its reach. He loved every minute of being president, and he left the position with deep regret. I mean, just for a moment, you've seen former presidents even in our time. They come in with nice brown auburn hair, and they leave stooped over and gray, okay? Not so TR, okay? He did not walk out that way. During his presidency, he famously said, quote, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error or shortcoming, but who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself for a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who, at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who knew neither victory nor defeat." So let's take a look at the life of TR. He was born on October 27, 1858 in Manhattan. His father was Theodore Roosevelt Sr., the youngest son of a wealthy New York businessman, and Martha Bullock Roosevelt, the daughter of a prosperous Georgia planter. Now, TR's father was his idol, okay, and a major influence in his life, calling him the best man I ever knew. For his entire life, TR strove to be worthy of him, and later of his memory. This was no mere boyhood infatuation, as Roosevelt Sr. was a man truly worth idolizing, okay? Although born to wealth and privilege, the elder Roosevelt had dedicated himself to public service in the form of charity and public betterment. Among his accomplishments, he was the founder of the New York City Children's Aid Society, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the American Museum of Natural History, and the New York Children's Orthopedic Hospital, okay? He was also a faithful husband and a kind and devoted father to his children. During the Civil War, Roosevelt Sr. was a friend of Abraham Lincoln and an active supporter of the Union. He was one of the charter members of the Union League Club, which was founded to promote the Northern cause. Now, this caused an undercurrent of strain in the family, as his wife privately remained loyal to her Southern sentiments. Okay? The one aspect of his father's life that troubled TR was that he never served in the Army during the war, but paid a substitute in his place. Okay? TR's later military ventures would be in some way to correct this perceived flaw in his otherwise immaculate father. Now, in all actuality, the father did more good for the Union cause than he could have possibly done by stopping a bullet in Antietam. Okay, so Teddy really didn't have any real reason to be ashamed of his father. His father did great things for the Union. Now, as a child, TR was both frail and sickly. Prone to terrible asthma attacks, these bouts would often strike him in the middle of the night. Beyond any medical treatment of the time, if you can believe it, the prescribed treatment for asthma for a child at this time was smoking a cigar. Medicine has come a long way. Okay? His father would carry him around in his arms until the attacks relented. This physical frailty made it difficult for TR to attend school, so he was tutored at home along with his siblings. And this inspired a lifetime love of reading, which is the hallmark of so many a great person. He devoured books his entire life, often reading a book in a single day. Okay? Years later, when single-handedly transporting 3 desperados that he had captured while out in the Dakota Territory, he read Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina by firelight to keep himself awake while on guard. I was just commenting to my wife when I was going over my notes. I've read several Russian authors, including Leo Tolstoy. That is not what I would do to stay awake. As he grew older, dissatisfied with his physical condition, he vowed to transform his frail body. With his father's encouragement, he threw himself into a regimen of exercise that included weightlifting, outdoor activity, and boxing. By the time he was an adult, most of his physical ailments had receded, though they never entirely left. Okay? Nevertheless, he made himself into an impressive physical specimen, renowned and admired for his energy and vigor. Now, when a young boy, TR developed a love of natural science, the study of animals and nature. He was given a shotgun and took to shooting, stuffing, and cataloging many species of birds and game, turning his living quarters into a virtual museum of natural history. This was the beginning of a lifelong love of the outdoors life. He determined to attend college to be a natural scientist when he grew older. He entered Harvard in 1876 to pursue this goal, but soon soured on the endeavor. Natural science at this time stressed lab work, and not the outdoors type of life that he enjoyed. I think what he really discovered was that he enjoyed stalking and hunting animals more than he enjoyed cataloging them, okay? Though there was no doubt that he revered the natural world. Harvard did not impress him either, okay? When he left home, his father admonished him to, quote, tend to your morals first, your health second, and your studies third. When TR arrived in Boston, he found the student body largely unconcerned with any of the three, and definitely not in that order, okay? Nevertheless, he did well in college and graduated by 1880. By this time, his beloved father had died at the early age of 46 and left him a substantial inheritance. TR was distraught by the loss of his father and was, for some time, gripped with melancholy. As he would his entire life, and with many opportunities to do so, he would combat grief with hard work. He later wrote, "A soft, easy life is not worth living, if it impairs the fiber of brain and heart and muscle. We must dare to be great, and we must realize that greatness is the fruit of toil and sacrifice and high courage. For us, it is the life of action, the strenuous performance of duty. Let us live in the harness, striving mightily. Let us rather run the risk of wearing out than rusting out." Now, after leaving Harvard, he returned home to New York and entered Columbia Law School, seeking a new profession to pursue. However, he also soon soured upon the law as well. He felt that too much of law was divorced from matters of genuine justice, okay? A very strict moralist his entire life, and a fervent admirer of Lincoln, the idea that the law should pursue any other end but a righteous one was anathema to him. Merely winning the case isn't good enough. The case must be worth winning, okay? He soon began taking an interest in politics. Now, this was unusual for a person of his social class at the time. Politics was considered a grubby, low profession that proper people should not sully their hands with. But TR saw it as an opportunity to achieve things of genuine worth, and the combativeness of the life appealed to his bellicose nature. He always loved a good fight. Politics would get him many. Now, this era of America was what Mark Twain had dubbed the Gilded Age, okay? One of its aspects was that it was also the golden age of general corruption in America, okay? Unlike today's pure and pristine world. Okay. Politics was the venue of the seedy people who ran the political machines in state and local government. Bribery, graft, and malfeasance of all kind infected the interconnected political and business culture. As I said, not like today. Okay. TR's friends were aghast that he would consider entering into this sort of life. But to him, if politics was so bad, all the more need for good people to become involved. In 1882, he got himself elected to the state assembly and soon became a voice for reform. He was dubbed by his opponents as a Harvard go-go, short for good government, okay? And his career began its meteoric rise. However, there were some terrible tragedies at this time as well. In 1880, he married Alice Lee, a beautiful young woman whom he had courted for 2 years. It was something of an idyllic matrimony between two starry-eyed young people. In 1884, Alice became pregnant. Several days after the birth of his first child, a daughter also named Alice, TR was serving in the state legislature when he was telegraphed to come home immediately. His mother had fallen sick, and when he arrived, he discovered that not only his mother, but his young wife was also critically ill. Within 7 hours of each other, both his wife and mother died, leaving him both orphaned and a widower at the same time. Devastated, he left his new daughter with his older sister and traveled out to the Dakota Territory, where he had purchased a cattle ranch on a previous hunting trip. He wrote of this time, "Black care rarely sits behind the rider whose pace is fast enough." Throwing himself into the life of a cowboy, he had to initially prove himself to his own employees, who regarded him as an eastern dandy, probably timid, and undoubtedly a tenderfoot. Okay? He soon proved them wrong, working as hard as anyone, sometimes riding 40 hours in a saddle. As to his being timid, when a local hooligan vowed to shoot the newcomer, TR showed up at the door with a pistol and a Winchester and told the man that, quote, "If he wanted a gunfight, let's get on with it." And the man never troubled him again. On another occasion, when he joined his men at the local saloon, another troublemaker began to harass him. TR put the man down with 3 quick blows to the chin. Okay? Now, TR stayed out west for 2 years and then returned to New York to resume his political and writing career, having already published a number of books by this time. Within a short while of his return, he began courting Edith Caro, a childhood friend of his sister who had spent much time with the Roosevelts while growing up. She had carried a torch for TR since they were children, and soon they were married. Now, Edith had the unfortunate position of second wife, okay, to a woman who would remain forever young in her husband's memory. Nevertheless, it was a very happy marriage that produced 5 additional children for TR besides his daughter by his first wife. His political career continued to prosper, first becoming Civil Service Commissioner and then Police Commissioner of New York City. In both positions, he continued to campaign for honesty and reform. As Police Commissioner, he would sometimes walk the streets of New York City until dawn, spontaneously checking on the behavior of his officers and, to their very great surprise, confronting them if he found them derelict in their duties. It was not all that uncommon for him to go into a house of ill repute to drag an officer out, okay, in the middle of the night, or a bar. In 1896, William McKinley was elected to the presidency. Through the intervention of his close friend, Senator Henry Cabot Lodge, TR was given the post of Assistant Secretary of the Navy. TR was a huge enthusiast about naval power. His first book had been a history of the Naval War of 1812. Given virtual free rein by his immediate superior, TR went about reforming the U.S. Navy, and this proved to be a well-timed undertaking. In 1898, the Spanish-American War commenced, and the American Navy dominated the conflict. Eager to see action and perhaps subconsciously wishing to redeem his father's failure to serve, TR resigned his government post and formed a regiment of volunteer cavalry composed of Western cowboys and Eastern sportsmen, soon known as the Rough Riders. Now, the Rough Riders received acclaim for their famous charge up San Juan Hill in the Spanish colony of Cuba. How much this battle actually contributed to the war effort is open to debate, but accounts of TR's remarkable courage in the face of fire are universal, okay, by eyewitnesses. He was hailed as a war hero by the press, and upon returning home was urged to run for governor of New York. Because of his reformist tendencies, he was not trusted by the friends of big business in his party, but they needed a winning candidate, and so he was chosen to run for the Republicans. TR won, and soon took up his reformist tendencies again. He was not a revolutionary radical in any sense. You should understand that. He was a positive reformer, wishing to conserve the best institutions in America by making them better and more just, okay? As governor, he taxed the corporations, tightened laws regulating sweatshops, utilities, food reform, and child labor laws. But when a strike threatened to turn to violence, determined to preserve order, he called out the National Guard. His basically philosophy was, if we don't give the workers the just requests that they are making, they may just come and take them, okay? Better to give them what is fair than to have them take more than what they need, you know? Now, the female leaders of the Republican Party in New York now wanted to get rid of him. Having put him in office, now they want to get rid of him. One senator stated, "I don't want that bastard raising hell in my state any longer." Okay. However, TR had become popular with the public. Their solution was to make him vice president, an office that he could do little, where he could do little harm. Now, John Adams famously said of the vice presidency, "My country has in its wisdom contrived for me the most insignificant office that ever the invention of man contrived, or his imagination conceived." Okay? It was hoped that here, TR would be hidden away and forgotten. Fate intervened on September 6, 1901, when President McKinley was shot by a crazed anarchist, dying a week later. The chairman of the Republican National Committee exclaimed, "Now look, that damned cowboy is president of the United States." TR was the youngest man ever to a seat to the presidency, with Kennedy being the youngest man ever elected, okay? He took office at a time when forces in society were demanding social, political, and economic change in America. TR would navigate between the entrenched greed and corruption on one side and the radicals advocating revolution on the other. His stand between the two would be for justice and reform. A believer in the free enterprise system, he nevertheless struck out at what he called the criminal rich. His primary goal was to protect capitalism from both socialism and from its own abuses. He struck out against the trusts, which were illegal combinations of big corporations that organized to stifle competition and control pricing. He attacked the railroads, the beef industry, and the coal and sugar companies. In 1902, he took it upon himself to personally mediate a nationwide coal strike that threatened the nation. When both sides refused to cooperate, he threatened to send the army in to operate the mines. Eventually, the strike was resolved with conditions reasonably satisfactory to both sides. To his critics, he replied, "My business is to see fair play among all men, capitalists and wage workers, to see to it that every man has a square deal." His other great domestic achievement was in the field of conservation of the natural resources. He said, "I do recognize the right and duty of this generation to develop and use the natural resources, but I do not recognize the right to waste them or to rob future generations that come after us." He set aside 150,000 acres of timberland, established 50 game preserves, and doubled the number of national parks. In foreign policy, he was an expansionist, believing that the technical advancements of his day had made America no longer secure by its two oceans alone. He recognized the need for a strong navy and overseas bases as the first line of defense against the restless and ambitious nations of the rest of the world. The idea of a canal that would cross through Central America had been in the works for a long time, with very little success by those who had attempted it. As the world became more dangerous, and with Roosevelt's conviction of the essential role of naval power, a canal was viewed as paramount in his mind, and he was determined to have one. In a complicated narrative, we're not going to go into detail here, he facilitated the independence of the province of Panama from Colombia by covertly supporting the rebels seeking that end. He sent the American fleet into the neighborhood to intimidate the Colombians and recognized Panama's independence quicker than it was probably deemed seemly, America received the rights to build and maintain a canal from the new nation of Panama. But by doing so, he soured relations between the United States and the rest of South American nations for generations. If his actions in this instance were less than strictly fair-minded, he felt he was justified by the importance of the undertaking. Now, during his second term, Roosevelt would win the Nobel Peace Prize for mediating an end to and settlement to the Russo-Japanese War. On one of his major foreign policy ventures was sending the American fleet on a worldwide tour to make a statement about American power, and to those who were becoming increasingly aggressive in the early part of the 20th century, particularly Japan. He was opposed in this by the Senate, who told him that they would not vote money to send the fleet abroad. TR told them that he had enough money to send the fleet out. If the Senate declined to provide money for them to return, they would just have to stay there. The Senate then capitulated. Now, during his time in office, TR and his family captivated the American public. His wife, Edith, was a gracious and dignified woman whose poise and deportment were a favorable counterweight to her rambunctious husband. TR's daughter, Alice, was another case. By this time, a young adult, she was called Princess Alice, by the press. She would slide down White House banisters in front of people and carried a live snake and a pistol in her handbag. When asked if he could not control his daughter, TR replied, "I can be president of the United States, or I can control Alice. I can't possibly do that." With her acerbic wit and public shenanigans, Alice would become a Washington, D.C. fixture for generations, dubbed the Other Washington Monument. She was the center of Washington society until her death in 1980 at the age of 96. And if you wanted to get anywhere in Washington politics, you darn well made sure you showed up at Alice Roosevelt's door and introduced yourself. Now, all his children ran wild in the White House, bringing their live animals with them and turning the executive mansion into what one writer called a three-ring circus. They roller skated down the hallways and walked on stilts in the high chambers. But the public loved it all. TR himself was the oldest of the children. One observer quipped that, "You must remember that the president is about 6 years old." TR had stated when he was reelected that he would honor the two-term tradition established by George Washington and not seek a third term. When the time came for him to relinquish the office, He deeply regretted that statement, but he would not go back on his word. He loved being president. I've always said there's only two men in the history of our country who couldn't get enough of the office, and they were both named Roosevelt. Okay? TR left office on March 1909, having secured the presidency for his close friend William Howard Taft. Taft had not wanted the job, but was persuaded by both TR and Taft's extremely ambitious wife to run. TR soon left for an African safari and then on to Europe to tour the continent. By the end of his venture, he said that, "I felt as if I met another king, I should bite him." He returned to New York, where he was given a parade that would not be surpassed in size until Charles Lindbergh's welcoming in 1927. But he was soon restless again. He stated that he did not feel that President Taft had lived up to his expectations as a successor. I suspect, in reality, he simply was longing for a return to his former glory. His positions had moved further to the left of center, and despite his popularity, when it came to pick a candidate for the presidency in 1912, the Republican Party held fast to the more dependable Taft. TR left the party and accepted the nomination of the Progressive Party for the 1912 election. Stating that he was as healthy as a bull moose, the party was soon tagged the Bull Moose Party. Now, during this campaign, at a speaking event, TR was shot in the chest at point-blank range by a deranged man. The bullet passed through his rolled-up speech, his metal eyeglass holder, and lodged 4 inches into his chest. Coughing into his hand and seeing no blood, he determined that the bullet had not pierced his lung, and he went on to deliver a 50-minute speech with a startled crowd before going to the hospital to have the bullet removed. Okay? In the 1920 election, TR would come in second, beating Taft and splitting the Republican. I think I got that date wrong. Okay. In the 1912 election, TR would come in second, beating Taft and splitting the Republican Party in the process. The result would be the election of the Democrat Woodrow Wilson, a man that TR would later come to loathe. And I will tell you, speaking personally, with good reason. Okay? After his defeat, he and his son Kermit joined a harrowing expedition, to explore the previously uncharted tributary of the Amazon River in Brazil, known as the River of Doubt. This venture took 3 months, traveling by canoe through one of the most dangerous places on Earth, and was almost the death of Roosevelt due to a serious injury and contracting a jungle fever. Now, when World War I broke out, he was eaten up with frustration at not being president at this historic period. He publicly denounced Wilson as a weak and timid creature for his reluctance to commit America to the war. He said of him, "Instead of speaking softly and carrying a big stick, President Wilson spoke bombastically and carried a dish rag." When America finally did enter the conflict, he asked to be able to assemble a volunteer regiment to fight in France. Citing his age, health, and, quote, intolerance to discipline, Wilson refused his request, only increasing TR's hatred of him. TR would get his revenge by assisting his old friend, Senator Henry Cabot Lodge, in preventing America's joining the League of Nations, Wilson's cherished, if worthless, creation. All of the Roosevelt sons served in the war, and all were wounded in action. His oldest son, Ted, would go on to become a general in the next war and lead the troops on Utah Beach at D-Day. Okay? However, TR's youngest boy, Quentin, a fighter pilot, would be shot down and killed during the war, breaking the heart of both TR and his wife. Now, having re-embraced the Republican Party, there was talk of running him again in 1920 for the presidency. But his lifetime of illness, the abuse of his body had sustained, and grief at his son's death caused his health to decline. On January 6, 1919, he passed in his sleep at his home on Sangamon Hill in New York. Death had taken him sleeping, one commentator noted. If he had been awake, there would have been a fight. Now, for me personally, taking his life from beginning to end, it's easy to see the magnificent strengths and sometimes glaring flaws in TR. Nevertheless, The thing that stands out to me is at times when our country is faced with alarming and dangerous situations, along with Lincoln and Washington, I find myself thinking, I wish we had someone like Theodore Roosevelt as president. And I think that says a lot about him. Thank you. And I would love to take any questions you may have about anything I've talked about. I will tell you, I will give you one of three answers to any question. I'll tell you what I know to be true, I'll tell you what I believe to be true, but can't say for sure, or I'll tell you I don't know. Okay. So any questions anybody have? Yes, sir. The gentleman in the back, and then I'll get the...
Isn't there a TV program on now about him?
I don't know.
Southwest?
Truth to tell, I honestly
Or
don't...
something?
I honestly don't watch television, so I
Okay.
don't know. I watch...
I haven't seen it yet.
On the History Channel? It's on the History Channel?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I haven't seen it. I know that Ken Burns did a series on the both hit Roosevelts several years ago, and we haven't seen that yet, have we? My wife and I, if it isn't on DVD and it's not at the library, we don't watch it. So I don't watch any broadcast TV, I'm sorry. So you can't see it. Sir, you had a question?
What year was Roosevelt born?
He was born in 1858, 2 years before the outbreak of the Civil War. He watched Lincoln's funeral procession through New York City from the window of his house. It went right by his house. His father, having been friends with Lincoln, he was a great admirer of Lincoln. So, and you could do worse. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I'm reading David McCullough's book about the early years
Oh,
of
yeah.
Teddy Roosevelt, and you were just talking about Lincoln's procession, and there was that picture of Elliot, his older brother, and TR, and McCullough talked about this little girl that was in a closet that was bothering them. That was Edith Carroll.
Oh.
It's Who's Your Second Wife?
Yes,
Who
yes.
was a childhood friend, and so I haven't finished the book. It's very good.
Anything by David McCullough is good. When I worked at I tell you, it's just not really part. When I worked for 15 years at Borders Bookstore. A great job. And among all of this is nationwide through our company, of all the authors who ever came to speak at any store, David McCullough was the most widely respected. Because he was a true gentleman. He just was gracious and kind to everybody. And not all authors, some authors come in there full of themselves. He was not. Great. Truly great. Yes.
Speaking of McCullough, at the History Center downtown on the 19th of November, his daughter is going to be there talking about her new book.
Oh, okay.
And so that you can just go online and look that up. I'm already registered.
When they named the bridge after him and he came to speak, my wife and I went to see him. It was great. I couldn't get close enough to him. It was he had his leg in a cast at that time, so he wasn't walking around at all to talk to me. Any other? Yes, sir.
Wasn't he the one that the teddy bear was named after?
Yes, he was. Yes, he had been hunting and he shot. I guess he shot a bear, and then there was a small bear cub.
They tied up a bear for him to shoot, and he refused to shoot it.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. So then they
From that they named
The teddy bear.
toy teddy bear after him.
yeah, and it's interesting because I'm sure he was happy about that, but he actually hated the name Teddy. Yeah, he liked to be called Theodore, not Teddy. Teddy was what people called him when he wasn't around. Okay. Or his sisters would call him that. But.
And that show he's talked about, I think that might be the one that's on the Discovery Channel. They're doing all the famous men that settled America, that set America. They went through Daniel Boone, and they're coming up through the list.
Oh, okay.
I don't know which series they're on right now, but I've seen two of the series so far.
I do miss some things while not watching TV, I have to say, but I make up for it with books. So, yeah, but it sounds like it would be a good show. Any other questions about this? Yes, ma'am.
It's not a question. So
Sure.
Did you realize that Bridgeville and the Panama Canal have two different connections?
No.
Mayor Brick, CP Mayor, owned, he had an airport up on where the Great Southern Shopping Center is, and he owned all that property up there. And he made first bricks it here, and they were paving bricks.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Flannery brothers, they were the ones that got vanadium to, they were in trouble with steam engines, with trains and all kinds of other different, things that were used. In fact, one of CP mayors, he had two sons. One, he had an amusement park called Racklin Park, I think was that one? Racklin Lakes.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, on Washington Pike. And he was actually killed when one of his steam engines that ran one of his rides blew up. And it actually killed him. So between CP, he was really.
And these were all used in the building of the Panama Canal?
Yes,
Okay.
they were. So they did that, they got all that taken care of,
Mhm.
with really, and they also, if it hadn't been for the Flannery brothers and their vanadium, there would never been Henry Ford would never have built the
Model T.
Model T,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I was talking to somebody the other day. I said, anybody who reads history and feels smarter is not getting it. Because the more history I read, the dumber I feel. Because for everything I learn, I find out 10 things I know nothing about. And then I have to learn those. And each one of those yields 10 more things that I don't know anything about. It's never ending, You're constantly finding out more and more and interconnected, and it's a very interesting thing. And speaking of David McCullough, I have not read his book, The Path Between the Seas, which is about the building of the Panama Canal, but I have to put it on the list.
One of the reasons that the Panama Canal was built in the early part of the 20th century and not by the French in the middle of the 19th century was not necessarily any engineering feats that they figured out, but it was just operational health.
Yeah, malaria.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They managed that, and just like Washington took care of the health of his soldiers,
Mm-hmm.
and that was one of the reasons that Washington success.
Yeah. Yes. Any other questions, anyone?
Oh, one thing, Henry Ford never gave the Flannery brothers or anybody else that helped him, never gave him credit for it.
Oh, I'm with Frank. I don't know a whole lot about Henry Ford, other than he built a car, and he built the cars, and assembly-wise.
Yeah, and what they did, they wanted to build the mill for cars in Bridgeville, but there wasn't enough property that CP Mayer owned that they could build something that big. So they built it in Akron, Ohio. So it was about halfway between their two places. But a couple of years ago, we were down in Fort Myers, where Henry Ford and Edison had their summer homes, and Withers. Anyway, Henry Ford, I saw, I have a display, of course, for the car, but there was a sign out that talked about, the fuel, the vanadium and stuff. It wasn't called that, but I knew what they were talking about because I had discovered that. And so I went up to the gentleman who was there to answer questions and stuff. I said, can you please tell me why the Flannery brothers were not given credit for, Model T, the steel that was in it? And he said, that's because Henry Ford never gave anybody but himself credit for anything he ever did, whether he did it or not. But I said, well, I don't really, he said, but I'll tell you one thing, we are getting very close to getting the Ford guys to admit about the Flannery brothers and the Canadian steel.
Well, that's a trait that he had in common with quite a few people in history. Yes, sir.
Yep, it was funny. I developed May I tell a dad joke that's short, appropriate, and occasionally funny?
Sure.
So, it's so funny, because I've had this joke for like 25 years, I mentioned it last week. So it goes like this, it's real short. So Henry Ford is on camera hiring a man to be the chauffeur and to put up the tent and take the tent when he would get together with his industrialist friends.
Yeah.
So that was part of it's true. The joke I made was that he invited Firestone and H.J. Hines one time. And H.J. Hines gave Henry Ford a great idea, but again, Henry Ford never gave him any credit for this incredibly functional accessory, because if he had, we would be looking at hindsight rather than a rear view mirror.
Okay, well, as long as we're telling jokes. I'll tell you a good one I heard this week. Since we're talking about a politician, okay? This is, yeah, my wife is good. Okay, good. Okay, politician dies, and he goes up to the pearly gates, okay? And St. Peter says to him, okay, well, this is the way we do it here. We're going to give you 1 day in heaven, and then we're going to give you 1 day in hell. And at the end of that time, you can choose which one you want to stay at. And the politician says, well, that's not what I heard. He goes, well, that's the way we do things. That's the policy. He says, okay. So he goes to heaven, okay, and it's nice. You know, there's choir music, and it's serene and everything like this. It's a little dull, okay? So the next day, he goes to hell. And he gets there, and he's expecting fire and brimstone and screams and sulfur and all this stuff. And he gets there, and it's beautiful, okay? There's a beautiful hotel, and he walks up to the hotel, and the devil comes out wearing a tuxedo, and he says, you know, this is not at all what I was expecting. And the devil says, well, we've been very misrepresented. So he spends the day, and he plays his round of golf, and then he sits by the pool and has a drink, and he goes and eats in a 5-star restaurant and stays the night in a beautiful hotel. And the next day, he goes back to the pearly gates, and he says to St. Peter, says, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but he says, I think I'd rather stay in hell. St. Peter says, okay, hell it is. So he gets back to hell, and it's fire and brimstone and screams and sulfur and everything, and the devil's standing there in his tuxedo, and he says, well, this isn't what I saw before. And the devil says, yeah, well, yesterday, he says, we were campaigning. He says, but now that you voted. Okay, we were talking about a politician, so I had to do it. Any other questions or comments before? Okay, well, thank you very much for your time and having me here. If you want to come up and look